Sounds True presents Invisible Acts of Power, Session 3, Generosity through the 4th and 5th Chakras with Carolyn Mace.
In entering into the 4th chakra, the image I like to provide people that helps understand or put you in touch with the incredible force field of the 4th chakra is the hourglass, where the top part is the 7th, the 6th, the 5th chakras, all of which contain a companionship energy that you'll understand as I continue to describe it, but essentially they are the creative force, the force through which energy comes in before it is focused into physical incarnation. And then it travels through the 4th chakra, which is the eye of the needle. And your heart is mission control, for lack of a better way to put it. It's at that point you decide whether or not to put your heart into something, your heart out of something. Essentially, the heart organ is the one that casts the vote as to whether or not anything you do, say, or involve yourself in your lifetime will have any longevity to it, including generosity. And then the bottom half of an hourglass is where the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd chakra is, which very much has the grounded, the acts you have done, the things you do, the way you think, has found a physical target. So thought goes into form, and its trigger point, the place where vibration crosses over from being etheric into matter, is the 4th chakra. It's probably something really to understand in terms of your life alchemy, because any time you think about whether your, quote, heart is really in something, think about what that means in terms of an hourglass. That it's that a decision, for example, is resting in your heart. These aren't metaphors. They're literal. It is literal. A decision does vibrationally rest in your heart. And in this case, we're going to take that profound power and discuss it in terms of what does it mean for generosity? How does that factor into the quality of you being intuitive or your fear of being intuitive? Generosity is such a funny little thing because you see 1st, 2nd, and 3rd generosity that has a factor of distance gives you the power to change someone else's life more than they can change yours. But when you get into your heart and you begin to feel what a person is not just going through physically, when you look at them and think 1st chakra, okay, they may have a rough time in the physical world, their 1st chakra. The 2nd chakra, they may have a rough time financially. The 3rd chakra, they may be going through a physical illness or a limitation or some bad experience with a job. Your ability to help them can be maintained at a distance where you have a distant, compassionate heart, certainly a kind heart, but you want to keep a barrier between how much their pain can influence your life versus your generosity influencing their life. And in each of us is a really, really delicate little mechanism that we are very much in touch with. We are both consciously and unconsciously in touch with knowing, if I cross this line and ask you one more question about what you're going through or who you are, or if I listen to you for one more moment, the end result will be that you and I will have woven one thread of our hearts together. And that will put me in a position of generous obligation or commitment that you know you won't be able to get out of. Suddenly your generosity invokes the possibility of guilt or the possibility of emotional risk, or the possibility that it could get too personal. These are very real fears people have. They're not fears that I've ever seen articulated, and they're not even fears I've ever thought of until I did this book. And that's when I saw that the human being is such an intuitive creature, such a delicately wired being, that the fundamental nature of us is to reach out to someone else. And I am now convinced that the way we grow up for the sake of survival is that a sense of fear of others is put into us because we really, it's a funny thing. It's a way the tribe tries to protect its children from wandering past the barriers of one's own and finding others to be just as lovely as their own tribe. Do you understand what I'm saying here? It's almost like we can't let you love that much, so we have to put some barriers around your heart. It's not really meant to be a conscious act just to make your children dislike someone else. At a primal, almost reptilian intuitive level, I think it's an act that calibrates the speed at which the heart opens in a child. I think that without some kind of chronos or time implement put into the heart, time and space implement put into the heart, it may be that we would love too fast, too much. We would become too empathic, and we would implode with the vulnerability and the needs of other people. I now am convinced of that. And that's why I think when I look at the material of this book, what I really felt was the journey of the gradual awakening to being able to open your heart to another person at a depth and a quality that would not cause you to implode when you connect with them. And that implosion, that feeling that I can be a part of your life, I can at least help you at this part of your life, would not take you down emotionally. Now, it's at this level that we're going to redefine or expand, not redefine so much as expand the meaning of generosity. Because up until now, I've been talking about generosity in a very physical, tactile way. But now we're going to talk about a different level, which is energetic generosity. We're going to begin with one that is very easy to explain and then work our way into the more subtle currents of the fourth chakra. And the first is the generosity of an act of forgiveness. Okay? Obviously, forgiveness is discussed in the fourth chakra all the time, and I don't need to go into the biological benefits of it or the benefits in terms of health, because I've spoken about that so many times before and certainly written about it. But what I did not see before was that forgiveness is a vibrational act of generosity that is transcendent of personal emotion. And let me explain what this does for the heart. The illusion of forgiveness in the lower half of the hourglass is that you are offering a pardon to someone as if you're saying what they did was all right, and you'll just forget it. And what happens is you're left with this resentment that they're now off the hook. But you have this scar tissue you have to keep dealing with. And at the physical level of forgiveness, that's really true. There is that experience. But now let's go to fourth chakra and add two factors, which are generosity and a factor of intuition. What happens at this level is that when you have a sense that I am transferring energy, when you become aware that you are a conscious source of energy, which in theory we understand, but theory and the experience of actually what that means can be lifetimes apart. It's one thing to think of yourself as an energetic being, And to say, well, I transfer energy, I think about it, it is one thing to do that. It's a whole nother thing to actually have one experience, one micro experience of feeling your heart shift. Because in a flash of a moment, you go from realizing that your heart is truly burdened by you forcing it to think negative thoughts about another person. This, and my language is specific, by you forcing your heart to think negative thoughts about another person. So this woman wrote to me and she said that she had a long-running conflict with her sister, and the usual stuff. And details, quite frankly, I'm convinced now don't matter. Who cares about details? I certainly don't. But they're good reading. I mean, so if you want the details, it was more or less the usual, a falling apart over an inheritance from the family. Isn't that always the case? Ben Franklin said, the test of a family comes at the inheritance time. And wasn't he right? Okay, so, but in this case, and it's so typical, the funds fell in left, right, and the center, and the one who felt that she should have been the executor of the will got cheated out, and so forth. So her bitterness had that sort of deep knife in it, and it was a combination of fourth chakra bitterness and second chakra wound, which is where money and inheritance are located in your body. Now, when a person like that wakes up one day and says, I have got to get in touch, I'm not well, I'm sinking, this resentment is taking me down, I can't go on like this. When a person finally gets to that stage and decides, I've got to go into therapy, I've got to go into healing, I've got to do something to get this out of me, what happens is, what you're really saying is, I've got to get in touch with a deeper connection to the nature of my life. Now, to push this on fast forward, what happened one day was, well, she was thinking about her relationship with her sister or praying about it. She had the experience when she thought, I've got to get to forgiveness. I must be able to let this go and forgive it. It had become her full-time conflict. It had eclipsed the other lesser conflicts of her life. What happened was she had maybe a microscopic, tiny kind of experience where for one little bit, she felt the emotion from her heart transferring to her sister. She felt it. In one way to think about what she experienced was that she went on the receiving end of what she was sending to her sister. And the result of that was that she felt as if a bullet had penetrated her heart and knocked her to the ground. And when she realized that every one of those thoughts toward her sister was like a bullet, and that it really, what she faced was not the metaphor, like a bullet. She experienced the bullet, and therein lies the power. That's what made the difference. She experienced it instead of metaphor. And she realized that she needed to cut the string. She needed to let it go. And for her in that instant, it was immediate. But the result of this, among the many wonderful things that came just for that one freeing of that kind of burden, was that she redefined, she understood forgiveness as one of the ultimate acts of generosity that you wouldn't even consider. You couldn't allow yourself to send energy to another person that could do so much harm. That you can choose to work through what you need to work through in life, as she said, but I can never again emotionally assassinate. Those were her words. I can never again emotionally assassinate people that have done harm to me in my life. Now, I found that eye-opening because for all that you think about when it comes to forgiveness, the idea of imaging yourself on the receiving end of what you're thinking is a profound transference of visualization. Usually people will say, imagine yourself cutting strings or this or that. It's a whole other thing to say, I think I'm going to exist this day in the heart of the person I'm trying to destroy. That was pretty incredible to me. That was absolutely incredible. So let us say that, obviously, forgiveness is one form of generosity. But what has that got to do with intuition? Let's jump into that park. I want to discuss intuition and what happens in your intuitive force when your heart becomes a more generous vessel. All right. Now, intuition in our culture has become a bit of a hybrid religion. I mean, what we've done is we've pursued intuition. We're the only culture, we're the only people I've ever encountered, even through all my research in history, who have ever pursued intuition as the substance of occupation. We're very bizarre, I've got to tell you. We've really gone across the limits here. But inasmuch as we've entered into the age of energy, and it is, and we really are living in the era of the psyche, I don't know that I could make a series, a lecture like this, these lectures, 40 or 50 or 60 years ago. Not that generosity was not there, but we were not prepared to expand our heart field or our mind field. We couldn't because of the sixth chakra, the way we saw the other person. Our social boundaries, our ethnic boundaries were profoundly more intense than they are today, as a rule, within our contemporary spiritual culture. And that has had a great deal to do with dropping your intuition barriers. So in a sense, because we've redefined the boundaries of our first chakra, i.e. our tribal familial, we've redefined sexual, interpersonal relationships, second chakra. In other words, we don't define ahead of time. We don't carry with us as strong a parameter around who we will allow ourselves to get to know and who we weren't. Remember, there was a time when you would only engage with people of the same social class, the same financial class, this yada yada, the same religion. We don't do that anymore. And while you may not have considered, why would that affect my intuition? How could that have an impact on my intuition? It's so obvious to me, because once you take the barriers down and you are no longer projecting judgment first around someone, you become able to receive information. You see, what a judgment is, what a judgment does, is it protects you from them reaching you first. Right? It protects you from their projecting a feeling into your heart that would make you vulnerable toward them first. And so what the, quote, judgmental heart does, there's a judgmental mind and there's a judgmental heart. What the judgmental heart does is that when it senses intuitively that it could like you, it could care for you, but then your lower chakras sense, but I'm not in the same social, or I'm not good enough, or my self-esteem can't match what my heart is telling me. The result is not that you would become intuitively, emotionally open, but that you have to shut down that facility, that ability in your heart right away. The intuition of the heart is a turning point. It is that level of maturity where you are between needing to do intuitive readings for yourself versus being able to read another person's emotional energy just on their behalf versus for anything your heart needs. Okay, let me say this again. You know, in all my years of doing intuitive readings and all the many psychics I've met in this world, and I've met a lot, you know, the truth is I meet very few who do readings past the fourth chakra. And I'm probably going to get shot for saying this, but it's true. I mean, I read people who, I meet people who have an ability, for example, to do what I'd call street readings. You know, nonsense. This, you're going to run into this person, you're going to do this, you're going to do this cheap street prediction stuff. But that's trash, okay? My experience is that going from being psychic to being a generous, clear intuitive is carving the way through the fourth chakra, okay? It's where you confront the fear, transfer the fear of being able to care for someone transcendent of what it means for you. To define love as what's in it for me, which is what a lot of people do, makes you regulate everything, including your intuitive perceptions, through a screen that says what's in it for me. So why would you perceive something intuitively for someone else if in fact you feared that that would do something to you emotionally? All right. One woman wrote about how she was out someplace, who knows where, but it was one of those situations where she ran into a friend. It wasn't really a friend yet. It was an acquaintance, but a long time. She knew this person forever and ever and ever. And they were never friends. They were never close. They were simply of the familiar neighborhood sort. But she said the moment she spotted her, she got this flash, and it was a heart flash. It was a heart flash that this person was going through an amazing amount of deep pain. She just knew it. And she wrote that the reason she knew it was because she had no interest in her. So where did that information come from? She said, I wasn't asking. I wonder how she is because I didn't care. Okay? All right. But I mean, yeah, I love that on it. She said, I didn't care. It wasn't a cold not caring. It was just one of those, it made, you know, and yet when she looked at her, and this other woman was not looking at her, they did not make eye contact, which is actually significant to this. She just simply looked, glanced, and thought, don't I know that? Oh, yes, it's her. And in that instant, she was flooded with this heart feeling that this person was in extreme grief. So she said, what am I supposed to do with that feeling? What am I supposed to do with that now? She said, I stood there thinking, well, now what am I supposed to do with this? So she said she went into the grocery store. This woman's in the grocery store, and she was deliberately sort of looking down the aisles. Is she there? Is she not? Should she run into her? She didn't know what to do. Finally, that woman's checking out her groceries. And she rolled her cart behind her. And she said, I intended to say, hi, how are you? She said, but out of my mouth came, I just feel like you're in so much grief. And I don't know what to say. I simply can feel it. She said the woman was shattered. The woman was shattered. She had, in 3 days, buried her mother and her son. And both of them had died suddenly. So it was half her life was gone, taken from her, you know. And she was almost breathless from grief. I mean, she was, you know that when you are in that much grief, you don't breathe deeply anymore. It stops right at the breastbone kind of thing. And that's what happened. And she said that she simply grabbed onto this woman and said, I don't know what to say, but the other one fell into her arms and simply wept right there in the grocery store. And she said that this was very interesting because she said, normally, I probably would have collapsed myself. She said, but somehow I just felt like I could hold her up while she cried. And it's as if the gods protected herself, the one writing the letter, from being overwhelmed by the grief of this person. Now that is high voltage channeling. That's the power of the transcendent, generous heart, where you can say, I can use my fourth chakra. Run your grief through mine. I have been involved with, exposed to channeling for years. I don't know, 25 years now. And I've met all kinds of characters, people who claim they channel everything from, Michael the Archangel, please, to, Mary, to, like as if the Madonna needs to be channeled. Will you stop? Stop. I can't deal with that. But it never occurred to me that as an act of healing, you could actually have a heart chakra so maturely generous, so refined in the nature of generosity, that you could deeply breathe and say, pass it on to me, I'll run it through. I never even thought about that till this letter came. I was overwhelmed by the innocence of this woman. It was like a download of understanding about the power of generosity in the fourth chakra, where I have previously considered healing to be an art of going externally with your energy, to be an art of saying, laying on of hands or praying for others or whatever. This was the first time that as I read the letter, I got the impression that it's possible to not care enough personally. Here's the clue. Your heart cannot care personally. What made her heart chakra such a phenomenal instrument of healing generosity was that she had no attachment to the people. She had no attachment to the outcome. She was not involved in the circumstance. Even, for all her compassion, she didn't know the people. And it was so spontaneous that she was able to just breathe deep and said, send the grief through my heart. Whatever I can heal, pass through me. I never ever saw that. I never even considered such a thing. Now that's powerful. That's overwhelming. And it made me realize, this one woman wrote the most delightful letter. She was from another culture, and she said, in my culture, in the Oriental culture, smiling at people isn't done. She says, you're not that intimate. That's too intimate to smile at someone. You just keep your head down and keep going. And it's really true. If you think of certain cultures, they don't make eye contact and they don't smile and they don't do this. Now, why would that be? Why would politeness and etiquette develop around keeping the fourth chakra closed as opposed to exposing your fourth chakra? But now, you know what? As I read her letter, she said, but I don't pay attention to that anymore. She said one of the kindest things that she experienced in America is that Americans smile at each other when they walk down the street, that they're not afraid to do that. Now, you know what? I walk down the street all the time smiling, saying, this book just turned my world upside down. But I think, and I see these people everywhere, and I see this little girl, this little Asian girl on a bus telling me that, but now I make it a point to smile at others. And I think with my heart, she says, I think with my heart, maybe have a nice day. Is that sweet? Maybe have a nice day. But But what she's meaning is maybe you will have a nice day. It's kind of a sweet blessing. Do you see what I mean? But for her to think with her heart and think, maybe have a nice day, is one of the sweetest things I have ever read in my life. I realized she was channeling her fourth chakra energy to people without any agenda at all. I mean, that is a phenomenally gentle, wondrous thing to do. I absolutely loved it. But what happens, when your intuition provides you fourth chakra data? What are you supposed to do with it? Because a lot of people wrote and said, I get the feeling, and feeling is going to put you in the fourth chakra vicinity. If someone said, I was thinking, I'm going to go to the sixth. But when someone said, I had this feeling, or what happens, what do I do when I feel like something's going on with somebody? Do I share that feeling? What do I do with that? Because that's fourth chakra intuition. That's fourth chakra compassion. How do you regulate that? How do you manage that? Because at this point, one of the differences between lower level intuition and upper level is consciousness. It becomes conscious, where you can know a situation where you are willing to invest just a little bit more of your personal emotional energy versus social obligatory energy, where you're willing to weave your heart into a situation and not just the lower chakras. So this man writes that at work, one of his coworkers was released from the job. The business was downsized and he lost his job. And he knew that this guy had a young family. So it was the big, huge, tragic story. So he came back and he was talking to his wife about it. And he was sharing with her, that this guy lost his job and he's got 2 kids and the size of the tragedy, because let's face it, it's not easy to turn around and then find another job where you suddenly are generating it's traumatic. What can be more traumatic than the vulnerability of having to support kids and a family and no place to go? So that's what they were discussing. And he said that he and his wife consciously said, how much are we willing to get involved with these people, knowing full well, as he said to me, we weren't opening our home, we were opening our hearts. Now, he distinguished this. Now, that was magnificent, that he said, we knew, we sat down, we talked. If we open our hearts to these people, we can't turn that off. We can't suddenly say to them, you've been in our house long enough. Now get off the couch and find an apartment. Because it's not first chakra. Do you see the difference here? You can say to someone, will you please move on here? It's wonderful. I can offer you this couch for a night, for a week. But then you got to go. This is not the same thing. When you reach out to people and you say, we are going to share your fear, your grief, your anguish, your hope. We're going to be a backup generator. A fourth chakra backup generator would be the image I'd give you. They decided, obviously, that they were going to do this. They decided what was it worth to them. Would they go a year? Would they go 2 months? How much money would they? Because obviously it might come to a point where they'd have to step in financially. It wasn't just about visiting these people with casseroles once a week. This was about what could they do. So they decided, they went through their budget and they cut out all the extras they didn't need, and that became the fund for this family. Okay? So when they finally went to see them, they were compassionate enough not to meet them in their home, so that they wouldn't be humiliated in their own home if they found it humiliating, to have other people say, we're here to help you. So they met, who knows where, I don't remember, but it was out of the home. And they talked to them, and they made it like an emotional, a heartfelt, compassionate life agreement, in the sense that they said, we, of our own free will, of our own free heart, we want to go this journey with you until you get back on your feet. They said, we're doing this, we have this budget, this is what we need to live on, so that your problem is not changing the quality of our lives, but we can help the quality of yours. They took aside the money they had from all their extras that they felt they didn't need, that life would be just fine if they didn't have this or go there. It was just fine. And his wife had said something like, it wasn't difficult for her to finally decide to do this with this family, because when she looked at getting, shoes or getting stuff, and then looked at one of their children who couldn't go to the high school, the private high school, who was a scholar, she said, how could I wear those shoes again? She said it was a no-brainer. So they said this is how much money they could provide. And of course, the lives of this family were woven together. As it turned out, he did find employment within 3 months. So it wasn't that it went on for 3 years, but the fact is they were willing to go on for 3 years. Isn't that unbelievable? This was not family. This was a coworker that he was not even particularly close with. This wasn't his best friend, which makes it all the more breathtaking, doesn't it? What makes your heart, what happens? What is it? What takes place when your heart is filled with instruction that is completely transcendent of ordinary instruction in your heart? Where does that come from? You've got to ask that. Where does that come from? What happens in your fourth chakra when you suddenly, and it usually, if I had to chart the sort of MO of this intuitive hit, it's not like something that comes in slowly. It's something that comes in instantly. If I had to put characteristics to divine downloads, they're instant. They're not slow. The gods don't there's no such thing as a slow apparition. Like is something there forming in the corner? I don't know. Just keep your eyes on it. It either shows up or it doesn't. Okay. Right? It doesn't take an hour for a Mary meltdown. Just either she shows up or she doesn't. It's a done deal, right? And it's the same way with a high voltage intuitive download in your heart. It hits, and that's it. And one of the other characteristics, trusting the 1,000+ letters that I had the privilege to read, as well as the many conversations, is that one of the divine signatures is that it's out of character. Or it will demand the max of your character. So it's almost as though the gods drop something in your heart that's so bizarre so that you notice it. If it was the same old, if, for example, I suddenly got a taste for a turtle hot fudge dessert, that's not exactly, believe me when I tell you, unusual. So why would they ask me to do that? I wouldn't notice it. But something like, are you willing to go the distance for these people? There were so many other wondrous stories of the fourth chakra that made me think about whether or not I had, what would I do? See, if I felt an instruction, the depth of which they felt it. See, I'm so used to feeling my downloads mentally. See, I get them mentally all the time. I'm forever getting downloaded with ideas and inspirations and thoughts. I love that world. But I'm very much aware that when it comes to letting things, ideas, feelings go down through the throat and into the heart, I absolutely make it more difficult to get into my eye of the needle. Absolutely I do. And I have to, because I think I'm very empathic and I can pick up so much, and I'm such a what can I do sort of person to help out, that I have to regulate the speed at which someone else's crisis, emotion, or need enters my energy field. I have to admit, unfortunately, I'm not conscious enough to do this consciously all the time. So I know what I do is, I don't know why I'm even telling you this, but I will shift into manufacturing negative thoughts, and I'm so good at it. And I have a variety of categories. I could do judgment, or I could do anger. I have a whole variety that I know I activate when I need to stop your emotion from coming into my field. But it's not just your emotion. I mean, I really got it now after doing this book. It's not just emotion. I can manage all kinds of stuff. It's that circuit that says if your energy gets to my heart and I have any inkling of what you're feeling in terms of vulnerability, I'll be hooked. And then if I don't answer your phone calls, I'll feel horrible. Then if I don't answer your emails, now I feel terrible. Now I'm suffering because you're suffering. I absolutely understood myself. I saw the whole picture, which made it, you have to ask yourself, this is when I understood that the fourth chakra, the need to mature our whole notion of what is love, of what is our response to another person and to another person's situation. How should they respond to us? Let's reverse it. What are you releasing when you are in emotional need? That can be, without a doubt, the most lonely time of a person's life. And it's not for lack of people around you necessarily. It's that no one can know the depth of an individual's grief or loss. It's impossible. It is impossible. All of our broken hearts feel different for each of us. All of our fears, all of our grief points of separation are different for each of us. So no one can know that. But is there a natural order of this universe in a benign, loving way that somehow, if the only thing we could do is release a prayer that says, I can't carry this, you got to send something, somehow, something, someone, a piece of paper, a note, anything, just send. Now, I know that prayer is answered in the blink of an eye. Even if the answer doesn't drop in right in front of you in the moment, that's completely irrelevant. I know the answer has entered into your orbit. I know that. I absolutely know it. And that sometimes the answer to a prayer takes a little longer to maneuver the furniture in your life to where you actually see its impact. I know one woman, actually this was one of the few letters I got where it was a husband and wife, signed by both a husband and wife. It was one of the few times ever that anyone ever wrote that. But they shared their story about the loss of a child, and that it was their only child, and the story is heartbreaking. The story is devastating. But when they looked at the healing, they realized that they wouldn't get out of it alive unless they changed their prayers. Okay? I think that's an incredible statement. I won't survive this unless I change my prayers. And the prayers had gone from, why did this happen to us? There must be a reason, which is the prayer of saying, will you please tell me why you did this? Okay, which is a prayer that never gets answered, by the way. I mean, you may as well go pound sand. That prayer does not have it. That's a dead end phone. That's like a disconnect number, eh? So they said that what they did was they started simply to say, you have to send something. You have to send us help. We can't get out of this one. And within a small period of time, and I don't remember how long actually, but it wasn't long. It was like a few weeks. It was not a long period of time. What happened was someone came by from a church for a donation thing at the door. There was a charity or who knows what. And she said, no, we're from this church. Oh, well, we don't go to church. Well, we have this kind of church. What kind of church is it? This is cha-cha-cha. And she said, the husband wrote it. He said that his wife would normally never engage that kind of conversation. It just wouldn't happen. All right. But they started to chat, and the next thing you know, the wife said, well, do you want to come in for some coffee? So they're coming in for coffee. So now they're talking about it, and then she opens up with her story. And the woman from that church spent the day with her. And, of course, inviting her to come to a church prayer service, which was a healing service, wouldn't you know? All right. Well, the long and the short of it, obviously, is they joined this church group. And it changed their lives, and it certainly helped them to heal. But when she opened the door, she certainly wouldn't think, you're my answer to the prayer. You just don't know. But what I do know is it is that fourth chakra request, that fourth chakra. I think every prayer is answered, but I guess I have this sort of feeling that prayers said above the waist get a little more attention than prayers said below the waist. It just sort of works that way. So, if you had to carry one small understanding about what fourth chakra generosity is in you, like a little bit of a reference, then think of fourth chakra generosity as the closest connection you have to what it is to love without condition, to accept someone unconditionally, to not at least judge their circumstance, to simply be open, to be mindful that your heart's capable of shooting a bullet or sending love. You know, throughout the book, Invisible Acts of Power, I used prayers that I found from traditions and prayers that people wrote, beautiful teachings from scriptures, poetry, and I put it wherever I thought it was chakra appropriate. So as we transition to the fifth chakra, I'm going to leave you with a prayer that beautifully speaks to you of the fourth, written by someone who wants to remain anonymous, so we'll just slip right into the prayer. I open my heart to receive love. I may not feel this love enter immediately, but I shall live and trust that love begins to flow into me the moment I request it, and that this flow is endless. I turn my attention to my heart intuition, and I open myself to receiving one clear insight. I bless those who surround me and support me, and those who support I benefit from, who I shall never meet in this lifetime. The subtitle of Invisible Acts of Power is Personal Choices That Create Miracles. And again, while I would never have considered writing a book on miracles, now I think they happen everywhere. Now I think I've swung the other way. I can't seem to bring myself back to center. But now no matter what, I think that must be a miracle. And I think about the many teachings that I read through this about from poets who say, just open and see what sprinkles in front of you and call that sprinkle a miracle. That's an altered state that the ordinary mortal doesn't see in life when they walk around at all. But when I looked at the stories and found the ones that were appropriate to the fifth chakra. They inspired the subtitle of Personal Choices That Create Miracles, because I was mindful for the first time of how much courage it takes to follow intuitive instruction that doesn't make any sense, that really puts you at risk. Okay? You can say in one sense that a lot of the examples seem to put people at risk, but that's not true. Not the way certain other ones do. Where, for example, as one woman said, she had a very strong feeling come into her that locked into her throat. You know how it feels when you're trying to choke back tears, and you get that sensation for a moment where your throat feels like the muscles in it are just squeezing and you can't even swallow? That's very much like the feeling of getting an intuitive download that is telling you to act on behalf of another person. But now, as I describe it, I'm convinced that like choking, intense sensation is actually, that's what guidance to speak up on behalf of another person feels like. Pay attention to that in your life. When that happens to you again, see if you can remember this and for a moment pause and think, is anyone else involved in the intensity of my throat chakra, of my fifth chakra, of my tears, of my need to respond via the fifth chakra? Is there anybody else involved? Why am I feeling this way? And you might discover that, in fact, something is coming through you that would put you at risk if, in fact, you followed the intuition to be of service in that way to another person. When you get an intuitive hit that you know has the potential to transform your life or an entire situation, not just change. Change is below the waist, transformation's above. Okay, so you can change a situation, like I think I'll just come in here and we'll just paint this room, we'll just make this a little better, we'll have a charity ball. Transformation means the courage to bring in a different level of consciousness. It is the difference between choosing to be the engine on a train or always financing the caboose. Both are generous, but one changes directions, and that's the fifth chakra. When I say these are choices that create miracles, that feeling of intuition that chokes your fifth chakra is incoming energy that you're not repairing from the earth, but transferring to the earth. Okay? It's coming down through you into the earth. And it's directed by the choices you make in response to that energy. And what a lot of people have written is that for them, even though the choice might not, as I describe them, seem great, big, huge to you, these were great, big, huge to them because they're the ones who knew the consequences. I so often have said in my life, and I will never do it again, when people have said to me that they were in a tense exchange or they have a lousy relationship or that ongoing nonsense between two people. And I'm guilty of having said, you know what I'd tell that person? Fifth chakra. You know what I'd tell that person? I'd tell them this and I'd tell them, yeah, I'd do this. Fifth chakra. But how easy is that? Because I don't have to live with the consequences. That's number one. And number two is, silence is a personal choice to create a miracle. To choose to say nothing, I now realize, is one of the finest, most elegant acts of generosity in the world. To choose to withhold a perception that will not serve a situation is a profound act of generosity and service. If you think about it and you think, what and who will be served by my opinion? And here in the fifth chakra is where you draw a real thick line that determines the difference between an opinion and discernment. Okay? In my opinion, you should do and you list all kinds of things that would you actually do yourself if you were in that situation? Or is discernment the ability to say to yourself, or the wisdom rather, to say to yourself, who's going to be served by this? If I put forward this opinion, will this situation be empowered or disempowered? Okay. And I'll tell you, it's very, very difficult sometimes to maintain silence. And I never thought of silence as an act of service until I read some letters, not a lot, but some letters of people who wrote in their regrets, who said what they regret most is that they weren't silent, but rather shut off their opinions carelessly at a time when the person to whom they were speaking was at their most vulnerable. So that you take the strength of your opinion and your so-called altogether life, and you ram it right through their shattered glass. And in a moment of trying to figure out what to do, they listen to you. Was that wisdom or not? I mean, do you see what? And this one woman said, I wish I could take back what I advised this woman to do. Because what she did was, in this moment of great vulnerability for this particular individual, she said she thought that she would help her across the line of her anguish with her husband by telling her what, quote, everybody in the neighborhood knew, and that's that he was having an affair. She saw that as an act of service at the time. Because here's this woman saying, that's it, it's over, I've got to leave this man. And this woman said, and I thought, absolutely, and let's just finalize it. Let's just put the I on the, what is that, the dot on the I and the T. Let's just put a period at the end of this sentence. Every one of us knows, and I think now is the wise time to tell you, the fifth chakra time to tell you. But your husband's having an affair, and we all knew it. Well, of course, that absolutely shattered this woman. And the woman went on to just a very devastatingly lonely life. Because it wasn't wisdom. It was a need to, I don't know, stir the pot or pass on gossip or have a little bit of ignition or get even with him. Who knows? But the guidance for silence is a conduit for a miracle. And I never saw that before. As I said, when I chose the subtitle, Personal Choices That Create Miracles, it was very appropriate to me because we think that miracles are bestowed upon us for good behavior. You don't realize how many of your choices, by acting in harmony with your intuitive guidance, create an atmosphere where situations can be changed at a greater speed of transformation because you are not putting up psychic obstacles. And the absence of psychic interference allows the laws of the universe, like magnetic attraction and cause and effect, to happen at who knows how much faster an earthly speed. So if you get that sort of guidance in your throat that says, don't say anything, then don't say anything. That is an unbelievable act, no matter how much you might feel or that you should say something. That fifth chakra is wiser than the fourth in some cases. That feeling of wanting to help out. You can tell, if you're still for a moment, if that feeling in the heart is pity or compassion. And then your fifth chakra says, act or stay silent. And sometimes you think, I must be able to say something. Don't you know that sometimes when you're blank, that's exactly what you're supposed to say. Blank. Similarly, when we listen to people share with us, because listening was, without a doubt, one of the gifts of service that people listed as among the most precious gifts people have given them, was that they've been there to listen when they needed to talk. Now, I want to point something out. No one said that they were grateful for the person who was listening to then take the ball a step further and solve their problems. Which is a very interesting thing to note. They weren't grateful for the fact that the person says, I'll do it for you and solve your problems, or I'll make your life decisions. They were simply grateful that someone could listen with a presence of objectivity and non-judgment. Again, we're in a profound state of generosity, where one woman said, I'll tell you what I'm good at. I'm good at listening. I'm a fabulous listener. I know it. I pride myself on that. She said, I even thought of a book saying, The Art of Listening, which personally, I think it would be great. But she said, I know that when someone wants to talk to me, she said, I know they want to because it's in my energy field, because I make my energy field a cozy place to rest. Isn't that a fabulous thing? She said, I make my energy field a cozy place to rest. It's a place for weary travelers. That's how she put it. She described her energy field as a rest stop, a place for weary travelers, a safe harbor. Is that not phenomenal? She said, so people come in and they'll talk to her, but the image she holds, 5th chakra, 6th, the image she holds is that you are welcomed to stay for a while, but not the night. Okay, so she has in her, she knows, she was very clear about what her limits are, what she can give, what she can't. But in knowing what she could give, she gave it better than anybody, which is the vision that you're welcome to come in. I'll listen. Leave your stuff here because I have a very good disposal system, and keep going. Is that not the most exquisite image you've ever heard? I love that. Okay, so I wanted to read a letter here. I'm choosing this story because I feel that the conflict that this woman described is more common than most people have ever stopped to realize. Sometimes we receive intuitive hits and we simply can't go through with them. Sometimes you know people who repeatedly make stupid or foolish choices. And it's so easy to say, I told you, 5th chakra. But real generosity of that high voltage, and this one's hard, is to just withdraw and think, except for the grace of God, go I. And I'm taking this from the text of Invisible Acts of Power. So it begins, for example, a person I know had to have surgery to remove a cancerous tumor. For years prior to finding the tumor, she had been having numerous energetic, intuitive signals, funny feelings that something was wrong and that she was just, quote, not herself. She continually blamed her increasing negative emotion and physical health on her marriage and job. Translation: she clearly identified 2 stress factors but decided not to do anything about them. Her response was, but what can I do? He won't change and I need the job. Do you know how many times I've heard this stuff? This is one, you know why I picked this letter? Because it looks like 1,000 others. She's representing, and not just women, she's representing people whose conflict with choice, 5th chakra, intuitive choice, is a suffering greater than they can possibly imagine. I know now that so much of the depression people have is not emotional, it's intuitive. Depression needs to be upgraded. There is such a thing as intuitive depression. Just like there is absolutely such a disorder as intuitive congestion. You do get depressed from having so much intuitive guidance that you don't want to hear and you don't want to act on. And yet you know you should, and the fourth is you know it's going to kill you. You don't think that's cause for depression? No, it's so obvious to me. It's so obvious. When I read this and I think, what is your real stress? Is it your marriage? No, it's not. It's that fifth chakra inability to follow guidance that is obviously screaming, you're meant to live. Why aren't you moving on? You see? And that's that inability to trust that, see, you have to understand something. When you get guidance of that intensity, it's because there's a next step waiting for you. You don't get that type of guidance so that you could then go across the street and get hit by a car. Connected. The gods are illogical from our point of view, paradoxical, chaotic, and random. But still, there is an order to our interior intuitive universe that is archetypally consistent. And that's the intuitive impulse that's directed at keeping you alive, at keeping your life in motion. And these types of choices, you see now, what I'm doing is directing you to intuitive choices that have to do with yourself more than others, or as well as others. Because part of acts of service includes how you treat yourself. And I will tell you for a fact, if you disregard your own intuitive hits, you lose your clarity on behalf of others. It's not just losing intuitive clarity, because that's not the be-all and end-all of life, let's face it. You simply cease being a clear being. Whether it's emotionally clear, psychologically clear, just you cease being centered and clear. And your fifth chakra goes into complete chaos because nothing consistent or congruent is guiding your choices. You simply respond to whatever data comes into you. You don't choose. And I'll tell you how this goes with prayer. When you are in intuitive overload, intuitive depression, you will go to the dark night of the soul. It's inevitable. Because, what would you do? Think. If you have a child, and the child is forever saying, I need some milk. You fill the cup, he throws it on the floor. I need some the cup. At some point, would you stop giving milk? Would you just stop it? Would you say, that's it, you're cut off? Until you appreciate the room's flooded and you're not drinking it, you're not using it, and I'm not giving you more. You'll drown if I give you more. The next step, organically, naturally, divinely, is to stop it. Not stop communication, but the choice to put you into stillness of your own interior voice. That's a breaking point for a lot of people. But you see, service to yourself and choices on your own behalf matter as much, if not in a way. I'll just say as much. There's no more going on here. Matters as much. Now remember, I shared a story earlier about a woman who was jogging, and she ran across that person whose dog had been hit by a car. And she felt an impulse go through her that said, go put your hands on that dog because you could heal it. But her response to that was, what will they say? Now, in the moment when that energy, that grace, the only thing you could call is grace, poured through her. Her response was, I can deal with, I know that that energy would help. But see, what happened was it hit her third chakra, which is low self-esteem, and she became more concerned with what they had to say about her than what she could do. Okay, so she chose to go by, and the dog died. Now I have a story to share with you, and again, I'm going to read this one directly because I love the wording, and I could hear her emotion. And it is a similar story of an intuitive hit, only in this case, the woman had that fifth chakra courage to step to the plate and do something that would even risk her future in this place where she was at. But in that moment of getting a hit so powerful that you don't even have to pause and say, I'm getting a powerful hit. It's powerful that God must be there and I must have something. You must have something else for me, right, God? Or you wouldn't give me a hit this big and you don't have time to do this. There is an inherent knowledge in you that when you are so animated would be the only thing. You become animated with a certain hit. The rest takes care of itself. You know you're taken care of because it's not your first. When you cease to be your first concern, then that is a kind of a grace. Okay, I want to read this. A letter from Sherry H. illustrates the courage it can take to act on your intuition. She says, a few years ago I was a volunteer at a local hospital. I found out a baby had been brought into the emergency room not breathing. Immediately I thought SIDS, since in 1988 my fourth child died of it at 3 months old. I left the office I was working to see if I could offer support to the parents. The mother was outside and her father-in-law was wailing. She was fine when I put her down. How can she be dead? Listening to her cry, I waited until the time was right and slowly walked over to them. I excused my barging in at such a time, but offered her a piece of paper with my name and phone number, explaining that I'd lost a baby to SIDS and that if she needed help or support, she could call me. She reached out and hugged me, and we both cried. We became good friends. That day I acted on my gut instinct to approach this grieving mother. The director of social services for the hospital saw this transpire and became so angry with me that she told the director of volunteers to fire me even though I was a volunteer. She told me that I had no business interfering in people's grief because I was not trained in grief counseling. I asked her if she had even had a child, much less one die of SIDS. She told me no. I told her that I had, and that made me an expert on the subject, adding that no amount of study could ever prepare one for what to do in such a situation, like having to live through this. The service I rendered that young mom stands out in my mind simply because I had to get outside myself and overcome my fear of meddling in other people's lives to find the courage to approach her. This is what I'm talking about in terms of having a fifth chakra intuitive hit that blends with courage and the willingness to say, this is transcendent. You see, you don't even know why you're getting it. In other forms of generosity on the lower level, it's more controllable. You can kind of see the territory. It's a whole nother thing when the gods download you with an instantaneous response to someone, something, a situation you don't know, you've never met, but you're the one that the gods are using to make the whole situation better. It's absolutely profound. And here, this is when I like to think of this type of generosity as beginning that ascension to the level of universality, that somehow these acts of generosity are tied into some greater mechanism around which the universe and our lives spin. Again, I really do believe that anything we do for anybody improves the quality of life in this universe. But then I think there are those tests of spirit that somehow empower the collective soul of humanity and not just the society in the neighborhood. And that these choices that come out of the blue, the ones that need courage for no reason, why should I risk my volunteer position at this hospital because of your tragedy? But she did. And who knows how the gods maneuver that as a result. I don't know what happened. I don't know if she's still volunteering at that hospital. It would be nice to know, but I don't. Similarly, you see, let me say that this is part of the connection that is very important for me to make sure that I say here, and that's that courage is directly involved with the quality of your intuition and the clarity of it. Okay, it's another regulator. I am forever screaming at people. I'm forever screaming at people, but I'm forever telling people intuition is not a gift. You are not gifted because you are so-called an intuitive or a psychic or all that nonsense. It is the natural consequence of self-esteem, wisdom, courage. And in the fifth chakra, place of wisdom, of discernment, these are qualities the spirit must learn. And as you learn those, becoming attuned to the other simply opens. And I was so enamored with fifth chakra intuition, fifth chakra service, because I recognized I have a whole newfound respect for those downloads that happen that have nothing to do with you, but that put your sense of self at risk, one way or another. And now, what I would say to people is the greater the risk, and you take that download and you have to run it through what's going to happen to me, what are my motives? If you actually can say to yourself, I don't have any agenda here. I don't know why I feel like this. I can't see anything to be gained, and quite frankly, most will be lost. That's a real download. That's the real thing. If you get one of those ideas and then you're following it with, and then they're going to like this, and then I'll get this, and then I'll get that, then you've given yourself a download. And it's also called a fantasy. And you'll fall on your face. And well, you should. But these, the real thing, are the ones that have absolutely no sense of bearing. I don't know where this came from. They'll hit you when you least expect it. And truly, go through it real fast in the sense of, where is this coming from? You'll remember what I said right here. You'll remember these words. You'll think, here's one of those moments. I have this feeling I should help this person. I'm just going to run through one thing. Do I have an agenda with this? Because if you do, you've created it from the lower half of the hourglass, tricked your heart, and threw it into your fifth chakra. If, on the other hand, it has absolutely no bearing on the geography below your waist, there's a real good chance it's come from above.
This concludes Session 3 of Invisible Acts of Power. Our program continues with Session 4.